Are you feeling called by the earth to live a life of deeper connection and purpose in harmony with nature and in a more conscious and sustainable way? If so, you'll love this interview with Teresa de Grosbois, who has created a beautiful transformation conscious community in Costa Rica. Tune in to find out more.
Soul Nectar Show, the Soul Nectar Show. You're invited, delighted to discover who you are. Anything is possible if you believe. So join us on this beautiful journey. Soul Nectar Show, Soul Nectar Show.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and we share our stories of connection to that which is greater than us, to the great mystery, beyond the veil, to those synchronistic moments that lead us inexorably to a deeper understanding of who we are and what we came here for. I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird, and I love having these conversations week after week. And I'm so grateful that you join us to have these conversations. And I sure would love for you to pop some comments in here and there so I know that you're listening and I know what you're interested in and what you enjoyed and what spoke to you. So if you have a second when you listen to an episode, if you could just pop some comments in, that would be wonderful. It would just help me connect to you, to our audience. And I am really feeling in my heart, we've had some really deep conversations over the last few weeks, and I know that we're in a really big time on the planet. And I know that many of us are feeling the awakening process and maybe a little bit more in the dirt of the awakening process, the mud, the mulch, the tenderness of it, and asking ourselves, where do we go from here? What are we creating? What is coming next? We know what's not working. How do we know what is working? How do we decide what to create? And what's clear to me is that we do that in ourselves, absolutely tapping into that inner knowing and that inner medicine, cultivating that ability to get still and quiet and come inside and find the answers within. But it's also in community, and we can't do it. No man is an island. Like, there was never a bigger time to know that than now, because not one person can build what we need to build all by themselves. We've got to do it together. And we need to, I believe, be committed to doing it consciously. And it's really, really easy to destroy a whole bunch of stuff and pound around like an elephant in a china closet and break everything. What's harder is to create something together. That's what's really challenging. That's what takes mastery. And so there's somebody I know that does that really well. And her name is Teresa de Grosbois, and she's here with us today. Welcome, Teresa.
So great to be here, Carrie. And you're not kidding. The shows have been off the frickin' charts lately. I feel really honored to be in this lineup. Thank you.
Yeah, it's exciting to have you here. And guys, Teresa was my first interview on this podcast. Some of you who have been with me since the beginning know that Teresa was the first one. The first one I didn't know, like my teachers interviewed with my summit and everything like that. But Teresa was actually my first legitimate interview. And we talked about whatever we talked about back then, but the context was the Evolutionary Business Council. And that was how I got to know Teresa, because she was pulling together people who felt like they were here for evolutionary change, people who felt that they were here for something greater than what we were seeing outpictured in our society. Now, Teresa's on to some more evolutionary stuff. And so we're going to talk about that today. Really excited. Teresa is a catalyst for conscious evolution, blending her expertise in marketing and leadership with a profound commitment to sustainable living. As a driving force behind Vista Mundo, which you'll learn about today, she is creating a model for conscious community development that prioritizes ecological harmony and personal growth. With a background in empowering leaders to create positive change, Teresa is now building a community where individuals can thrive in connection with nature and with each other. And we're going to talk about that today. I'm so grateful to have you on, because I've studied with many women leaders, right? And mostly in a spiritual context, and to see the different ways that women bring community together and what works and what doesn't work. And it's a process to bring people together in community. And I believe that we're at this time, Teresa, where it's like we are reweaving the grandmother web. We're reweaving the sacred hoop, where women come together and form the basis of community, where women work together to create and harmonize community. And It's been a pleasure to be part of the creations that you created and to see your leadership in action. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, it's just a joy. It has been a really fun evolution. I loved how you talked about, sometimes we're in the mud of the personal transformation. And for me, that was a big part of why I wanted to create a physical community where people committed to deep transformation would gather, because God knows I need the work as much as the next person. Like, we might be out there on stage teaching personal power empowerment and how to get your vibration up. And then the car breaks for the 17th time in 2 months, or some kind of bad luck starts raining down on you. And last year for me, it was I fell off a ladder and broke my hip and broke my arm right on the heels of finding out that my business partner had stage 4 cancer. So, I was still in grieving for that. And man, oh man, I was not very transformational in that moment. So it's so awesome to have amazing leaders and high vibrational people around you to remind you who you are when you lose your peg, as they say, and need help back up.
Yeah. And permission to be human. That's what we're here for, right? We're on the planet, we're being human, and we're doing it with as much consciousness as we can bring to the moment because we're human. Every time we have one of those breaks, so to speak, that's an opportunity for us to receive from others too, right? And because as teachers, as leaders, as guides, as spoke people, sometimes it's a one-way street. Like, we're always in this position of sharing or teaching. But what's so cool is when it's a two-way street and you get to receive too.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? I really do believe what a lot of transformational leaders say, that you become like the 5 people you hang out with the most. So one of my motivations for creating a physical community where we all live next door to each other was really like very selfish. Who do I want to hang out with? Who do I want part of me? Because I really realized I'm not going upward vibrationally unless I really seek out the kind of neighbors that can help me when my vibration starts to slip. And man, oh man, it's just been a joy seeing the people who've been attracted, whether they're people who are actually coming down here on a more permanent basis, or just volunteers or teachers passing through the community. It's been pretty amazing, the people that have been gathering down here.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So I know that if you're creating a community, you're creating a vibration, you're creating an intention to attract people to what you're building. What are the core values? What is your core intention for this community?
Well, first and foremost, our core intention is consciousness. In other words, are we the kind of community that's deeply committed to our own personal growth? And when you're deeply committed to your own personal growth and your own consciousness, then it's very easy to also be committed to environmental sustainability, to integration with the community, to being LGBTQ friendly, and looking at who are we in the whole BIPOC conversation. Because a conscious community is going to think about those things. So what I was seeing when I first came down here, there was a lot of communities being created around eco-sustainability, but they're putting eco-sustainability first. And I thought, I do love that, but there's an or better. And the or better is, let's make the foundation of the community environmental consciousness, and then talk about what can we have fun with inside that conversation. Let's build a food forest. Let's do all these really cool things that are a better way for how we live together as a community.
Yeah. And so it starts with having a vision, right? Like, as a leader, as a creator of something that other people will participate in, the first step is to get really clear in yourself about what it is that you really desire to create, what it is that if you were working 80 hours a week doing it, you would be fueled by that experience rather than depleted by it, right? We're building an intermedicine community here with my husband and I. And so that's conversations on my mind. It's like, we're building something that other people will say yes to. So the first thing is to be really clear about what it is that we intend. And then with a lot of flexibility for it can evolve, right? Because if we're too controlling with it or too myopic, then there's not enough room for other people to co-create. And that's the cool thing about co-creation, is like being so courageous that you can allow things to also morph and transform through the engagement of the community members, and being sort of solid in that, actually holding that space that things can transform like that. It's a trip. It really is so cool. And it's also like, woo, this thing's moving around. And how do we create that? I don't know if you experience any of that with the creation that you're making over there, but I sense that you do.
I think as transformational leaders, the first thing we've got to really surrender to is impermanence, right? Like, no matter what the situation is now, it'll be different in 5 minutes and definitely different in a year, right? So being a visionary means you've got to be committed to a vision, but also hold it loosely enough that the universe can deliver a more better. I love how I know you talk about this a lot. Jennifer Huff talks about this. A lot of people in the transformational movement that talk about there's a more better out there, right? And so, when we first started it, those of us who are involved really said, well, our first and foremost commitment has to be we're each internally doing our own work. And then we thought about, okay, well, what are the projects? So we decided the very first project was going to be to build our first retreat center down here, because we're actually holding a vision of a community that has multiple retreat centers in it. It has a food forest, that has the kind of neighbors you're really excited to bump into on the road and talk about possibilities and vision and what you can create together. So like the first retreat center is now up and running. In fact, it's for sale now because I'm like, oh, I'm calling all angels. Let's attract our first amazing buyers so that, I can move on to the next project once this one's sold. It's been really fun. Been really fun to just surrender to the whole question of what's next inside of this commitment of what can we do if we actually were committed to building a physical space together where people deeply committed to transformation live together, right? So it's been a very different journey for me than leading the online community that I used to lead that, gathered in all the leaders. It's been really fun.
Yeah, the in-person makes it a next level of commitment to the journey.
Yeah, very much so. And in person and also integrated. One of the things we didn't want to do when we came down here was create some little enclave behind a gate. The Costa Ricans live out there and we're inside the gate and we're only English speaking in here and you're all Spanish out there. And there's just two worlds that don't merge, right? And we said, well, that's never going to work. And so we came down and we started talking to our Costa Rican friends and colleagues about like, how do we do this? And so the very first thing we got rid of in the vision of the project was the gate. Like some people were asking, is it going to be a gated community? And, because that's very big in North America, you create a gated community because it's more safe. And after we lived here for a few months, we realized Costa Rica is freaking one of the safest countries in the whole world. You don't need a gate. The only reason people have gates on their houses is because their houses often have no walls. Like we live in the Goldilocks zone here, right? They nickname that in Costa Rica because it's at the perfect elevations to not be too hot or too cold, right? So in the Goldilocks zone, you don't need heat or air conditioning. Like it's always at perfect temperatures, right? So you often do see houses with big fences and big gates on them. But it's because when you go in and visit those neighbors, you realize, oh, there's no wall in their living room. The big screen TV is open to the backyard, So it really had us rethink, what's the purpose of a gate and why do we want one? So it's been really fun letting our own thinking evolve as we built this project.
Yeah. And I love that you're talking about like integrating with the community because the existing people, the people of the land, because of course, I'm all about Indigenous people and honoring Indigenous people. And one thing I noticed when my husband and I went on one of our rare actual just vacation, not initiation, because we're so big into initiations, it's crazy. We're just like always going someplace to have an initiation. But we went down to Mexico and we went to one of those. We sat through one of the presentations, at the resort kind of thing. And it was so ick to me because the whole thing is just ick. It's like you're just taking your Western culture and just plopping it down on land that then like the locals work for you. And it creates this sort of caste system of the wealthy people that come in on vacation and then everybody who's local and just serving, right? And that was just so ick. It sounds like you guys are not doing that. It sounds like you're doing something else. Like that's more honoring of the people that live there.
Yeah, our vision has really evolved, I have to say, after meeting both native Costa Ricans or just Costa Ricans whose families have been here for 300-400 years. Because, when we originally came down, we thought, oh, we'll set aside land and we'll have like a little farm in the community and we can hire some locals to come in to farm it. And then I was speaking to a friend of mine who's Indigenous here. And he was saying, well, that's not the way the Indigenous would live. Your houses would be in and around the food. And like everybody would have a food tree in their yard and everybody has a little garden and you all share food and pass food back and forth. But the farm or the garden isn't out there and it's not monoculture. It's like everything is integrated in around the buildings. And what he was describing for me was very much what you'd consider to be a biophilic community, right? A community that's completely integrated into nature. And that lit me up when he started talking about that. I'm like, oh, that makes so much more sense. Why can't the eggplant tree you're picking your dinner from also be the shade tree in your front yard? Why can't it be both, right? And that really got me excited to think about how are we doing this. Of course, what that did mean was we had to kind of slow down on the integration of our food forest, because all of a sudden we realized, okay, I guess we got to get the buildings in place first and then start thinking about what makes sense to plant where. That's really part of it. As a community developer, sometimes you just got to learn to surrender to what makes more sense and let the universe guide the project instead of having this set agenda for, okay, in January, tomato plants are going in, and then we're going to create a row of mango trees over there. And nothing wrong with North American agricultural thinking, but I had to start setting some of that aside and thinking about, no, what really makes sense here on the land. And ironically, in Costa Rica, like the position on the hill 20 feet away might make the difference between whether a certain type of a tree grows there. So you really do start to have to get friends and local farmers and Indigenous people to come in and advise you. And it is a slow process, but it's a really exciting and interesting process to try and learn it all. It's been really cool.
It sounds like a really feminine process. Like in Western culture, we're so good at the quote masculine mind, right? And not to say that it's all men in physical bodies, but just the energetics of that. You could also call it warrior. So like that doer, that creator, that thinker, that don't go, do. And so, yeah, in that mind, it's like, what's the fastest, most expeditious way to get this done? And then, well, I just make a box over here and call that garden, community garden. Everybody contributes with that. And then I make this other space that's called this person. And so that's how our minds have been domesticated. But not everywhere in the world are people's minds domesticated that way, as we find out. Like in South American countries, they're not domesticated that way. They don't think that way necessarily. So it's very different culturally, especially Indigenous people. Like they thought it was so weird that we wanted them to like divide up property with fences. They're like, why would you do that? What are fences for? We don't understand fences. It's a really different way of thinking, right?
Very much so. I was visiting a different Native friend a couple of years ago, and they had this giant gourd hanging from their patio, and there's this little tiny bees flying in and out. And I'm like, what's that? Like, why do you have this gourd hanging from your patio? And he explained to me, oh, these are little mariola bees. They're stingless bees. And they have a particular gourd, like a fruit of a particular tree they really like. And they go inside this fruit and they make a big beehive in there. And after a year or two, you crack it open and it's full of honey. Like, where do I get one?
That's cool.
Yeah. And then I started realizing, like, we got to get this guy teaching this. And so it's funny that sort of twigged me into, oh, there's actually a few people here in Costa Rica who are teaching how to create these little hives for these little mariola bees. And they're very tiny. They're one of the tiniest bees you'll ever see. And you just hang them somewhere on your property, and then you go grab it in a couple of years and it'll be full of honey. And they don't sting. They're completely noiseless. Like they don't buzz. They're not annoying. They just hang out wherever the hive is. So it's been really fascinating, like finding out how much traditional knowledge there is here of simple little things like that, which are like, oh my God, I don't have to buy my honey in the grocery store. One of the things I love about Costa Rica is they really have still a very thriving culture of farmers markets here. And I've come to realize the farmers markets are really just mostly backyard farmers. I would say almost 20% of the people at the farmers markets are often Indigenous or, just people who've been here forever. Talk to them long enough, you realize most of them are going to organic standards just because they're very practical people. Why would we waste money on chemicals when nature is so freaking abundant? They look at you like you're crazy if you ask them if they spray chemicals. They're just like, do you want us to? I'm like, no, please don't. So it's pretty amazing. It's one of my favorite things to do on the entire week is to go wander around the farmers markets and buy all my groceries there. It's probably about a quarter of the price what you pay in North America for your groceries. And it's like all amazingly fresh and incredible food.
Yeah, I've had that experience going to Peru and Mexico, is that the food is really fresh and they're usually growing it themselves. And it's not this commercialized thing. It's a family oriented thing. It's much smaller scale and it's thoughtful. It's intentional and it's thoughtful too, which is so cool. I know that you're really committed to the eco-sustainability and you're really committed to those practices. What are some other ways? I mean, it sounds like you're shopping from the local organic farmers, you're giving back to the community, you're What other kinds of things are you doing to reduce environmental impact? Or
Really encouraging everyone in our community to think about how they use their water. It's funny, in the tropics, you really realize water is ridiculously abundant certain times of the year and ridiculously scarce other times of the year, right? So one of our community values is you either put in a gray water system or you have a composting toilet, but you do something to think about what's your water use and how are you contributing to making sure that the use of water here is sustainable, because the demand on water in the dry season here becomes ridiculous, because to keep your food plants alive, you have to be out there watering them, right? So why aren't you watering them with gray water? It's just not that much more expensive to put in a gray water system. We're also doing a lot of community initiatives. We're not worrying about every single house having solar immediately. Instead, we're making the commitment to, when everybody's ready, let's look at making bulk purchases of solar panels or off-grid systems so we can do that. Costa Rica's grid is already eco-sustainable, right? They already have one of the few zero-emission grids on the entire planet. So we're not making it an urgency for people to go solar because the grid's already sustainable. But from a standpoint of personal sustainability, making sure you're prepared for whatever comes, having solar or wind backup systems just makes huge sense. So we're going to be looking at things like that as a community to make sure everybody's well established and well prepared. So we've done a lot of little projects like that. Like we put a freshwater filter on our swimming pool. So the community swimming pool has a UV filter, so it takes no chemicals. And we're a chemical-free zone. So instead of spraying all kinds of chemicals and Roundup or whatever, like we just hire the locals to come in and pull the weeds and cut the grass, and it's not that big a deal. So it's been really fun figuring out how to do all this.
it sounds pretty awesome. I don't know that you really thought about all that when you decided you were going to go down there. I think you were trying to escape winter, but because you're from Canada.
Very much. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like this has really evolved you personally. This being in this totally different way of living and thinking and being has really shifted you in a lot of ways. I mean, I pick up on it, but what do you want to share with us about psychological, emotional, psychosocial sort of transformation that as a Western person you experienced coming down there to Costa Rica?
It's been an amazing journey. Because I'm not only Canadian, I'm like Northern Canadian. Like I grew up in the backwoods. We used to spend our summers in a boat access cabin. We'd go in every year and then I wouldn't see any of my friends for 2.5 months, just my siblings. So the whole notion of like living off nature and living very simply was something I was introduced to, as a 2-year-old. Because once you're out in the middle of nowhere, like you're fishing for food or, maybe you bring in a bag of flour, and my dad used to bake the bread for us every week and things like that, But it was so juicy living that way. It's just so lovely. But interestingly, when I came down to Costa Rica, there's always the fantasy in our minds of how it's going to look. And then you get down here and you realize, oh, all this stuff I thought I knew about sustainable building practices and whatnot, I really have to rethink it because we're in a termite zone. You have all these, I might humbly say I was a little arrogant. I had all these great ideas I thought we were going to try. And then the locals are kind of like, well, Teresa, you really need to think about this and you really need to think about that. And I really had to adjust how I thought about the whole thing. But it was fun going through that whole experience and really thinking about, what does sustainable building practices mean? And what does sustainable living mean? And, how do we make our buying purchases? Because there's 2 aspects to sustainability, right? Like, are you buying sustainable products, but also how long is that product going to last as the thing you do? If you have to keep rebuilding something, that's not particularly sustainable either. So to have to come in and keep repairing something or whatever, the locals would challenge you and say, is that really a good idea to have a backhoe in here once a year with all those emissions and everything to fix this thing just so you could be committed to building it with that product? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I hear you. I really need to think about what does sustainability mean? So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a real adventure to really not only have my thinking challenged, but to be able to challenge the thinking of some of the people down here and come to new solutions and new ways of doing things. It's been really an amazing journey.
Yeah. And I'm really, like, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, wow, you're really doing what I feel would be so healthy for literally the entire United States, is listening to Mother Nature, really listening to Mother Nature about what would work best in each space, because it's kind of like a really different perspective I think in the United States, we're kind of like, I want to do this. And so I'm just going to shove it here. And if it doesn't work, and I'm just going to make it happen the way I want it to happen. And what you're saying is that the wild, right? Like the wild, I'm into this, the opening back of the wild feminine right now. Like I'm really in that because I have a new group and the group is working with wolf medicine. And all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, wolf, yay, because it's like the wild, right? And I mean, it's exciting to me. And so I'm like, wow, wolf, wild. And that wild feminine energy, it's more powerful than what men could put on the land, right? Like it will take it out. And so that is something that, for whatever reason, has not happened here in the United States. We've had the wild has been trampled on, in many cases. But there's places in the world that the wild still prevails. And Costa Rica is one of those. I know Peru is one of those places where the wild prevails. Like you're just not going to build something in the jungle that you want just because you want it, because the jungle's going to take it over. Okay. So it sounds like that is the same in Costa Rica. And it must be really refreshing to live in that kind of space.
It's been really fascinating for me, just in terms of my own personal evolution on this journey, because one of the things I realized after coming down here is we as North Americans have really lost touch with our food and how we live and what we put in our bodies. Costa Ricans haven't lost that. Most of the ones I know, I should speak in general for the whole country, but one of the reasons Costa Rica is a blue zone, and for people who don't know what a blue zone is, there was, an original study. I'm trying to remember the name of the scientist, but he looked at what districts in the world had the highest longevity, like the most number of people beyond the age of 100. And Costa Rica was one of those zones, the Guanacaste province of Costa Rica. And then later, when people looked at Costa Rica, they realized that the only province in Costa Rica that doesn't have a quarter of that province in the capital, San Jose, is the Guanacaste province. And when they started looking at all the rural towns all around Costa Rica, almost every rural town has centenarians in it. It's just their statistics are dragged down by the numbers in the capital. Like, so the people living in the city aren't experiencing this. But if you're in Costa Rica and you're living in the country, there's good odds that you're living to a ripe old age. Like our little town here, Berlin, last time I checked, there's 6 centenarians in our local town of Berlin. Like we just got another one 2 months ago. He had his 100th birthday. And we were like, oh my God, like there's more. How cool is that? But I think so much of that has to do with living in community, living where there's an amazing support system, living where you still have some purpose. When you see these centenarians, they're still a thriving part of the community. They're out tending the gardens or doing the food or helping the family business or minding the kids, but they have a vital role in the structure of the community. And I think most importantly, I would say most Costa Ricans, at least those who live in the more rural areas, I'm not sure about the capital, but probably 80% of their diet is fresh food, at least 80%, if not more than that. Boy, the way you live, when your dinner was just picked an hour ago, or the egg you eat for breakfast was only hatched in the last day or two, and when the coconut milk you're having on your cereal came from a coconut that came off a tree just 2 days ago, and the cheese that you're eating was actually made from someone at the farmer's market, from fresh milk from his cow that he milked last week. And it's like the whole process of the milking and the making the cheese is less than 2 weeks old. And then you go up to North America and you realize when you eat an egg in North America, before it hits the grocery store shelf, it's probably 3 months old. And the milk you eat out of the jug, before it hits the grocery store shelf, it's probably 2 months old. So we're getting it at the end of its usable life cycle. And boy, you just notice the difference in your health so much from how you're eating up there and how you're eating and living down here. I love making my own coconut yogurt, and I love making my own kombucha. And it's just incredible how you can live down here. It really is.
Yeah. And it seems like in that environment, connected to the earth, connected to community, that then all of a sudden the elders are really important to the community and are celebrated in the community rather than relegated to nursing homes and places where it's like, okay, we can't take care of you, so you go over here while we live our busy life and we sort of get on without you. It's a difference in perspective about what to value. I feel like, of course, everybody should be valued, but I think there's a preponderance of valuing youth in Western culture. It's all about the youth. Yeah. And when you have the youth perspective or predominance in the valuation, what happens is that you'll get situations where people, leaders of the culture, say things like, oh, empathy is overrated. We're too empathetic. We need to be less empathetic. Or you have people not understanding the impact to elderly people to have their only means of survival threatened, and the panic that it would send an elderly person into, to have that threatened. Feels like in a culture that values their elders and values community, that wouldn't even be a question. Of course, we're taking care of you. Of course, you're included. Of course, we're going to provide for you. It's a different mentality. It's a different way of seeing things in the cycle of life and holding space, like who's making the decisions, probably more on the elder side, making the decisions for a community rather than more on the younger side with less experience, right? More people with more wisdom and more experience guiding the conversation, the community decisions, rather than people with less experience, but more energy. So I don't know. Do you see that same thing that I'm sharing with you right now? Like the focus
Yeah,
is a bit
very much
different.
so. It's a profound noticing. Like one of the things that causes a lot of curiosity in me is I have yet to meet an elderly person here who has dementia. And I have yet to hear about anyone putting an elderly family member in an old age home. I'm wondering if they exist here. I'm thinking they probably do. There must be some somewhere, but they're certainly not prevalent in this society. When I broke my hip just over a year ago, I mean, that was scary. Like here I am in a foreign country, and it was one of those thoughtless moments. It was just, I normally ask my staff to do little jobs, but there was like a 1-minute job of fixing something up on the wall, and there was a ladder handy. I ran up the ladder and the ladder broke and I came crashing down, right? And on the heels of that, I know, transformational leader aside, I had a lot of anxiety come out. I was really struggling with my own inner state. My physiotherapist comes along the first morning. First of all, one of the most positive individuals I ever met. He was so beautiful. Like he would just look at me and say, "Oh my God, you're doing so well." And I'd be like, "Are you kidding? I can barely walk. What are you talking about?" He'd be like, "No, you're doing great." And then he sent me a little video. His elderly grandfather, he had told his grandfather about me. His elderly grandfather that was 98 years old made a little video for me. And he said to me in Spanish, "Teresa, I broke my hip a year and a half ago, and look at I'm dancing now." And it was this little 98-year-old man, and he was dancing and smiling, and he looked in the peak of health. And I just thought, what am I worrying about? Like he's 98 and he recovered from this. I'm still just in my 60s and barely into early retirement. And why am I feeling sorry for myself? It was such a sweet gesture. It meant so much to me. Now, whenever I hear someone has a family member who's broken a hip or something, I send them a video because that meant so much to me.
Yeah. And that's just so fascinating. Yeah. I'm really feeling that. I mean, I'm feeling just the total change in community, and community is an actual thing down there, whereas in the United States, it's very interesting when you have community. I'm not sure. Yeah. It's different. It's just very different. It's just a different way of perceiving things. So sounds really interesting. And I know that you have opportunities to join your community and be part of it if people are interested. Of course, I'm sure you have some desires for the people who would decide to participate, right? It would have to be according to those guidelines, like, definitely somebody who does your own personal mastery work, somebody who's open to changing a lot of things in their lifestyle and being really open to integrating and learning new ways of being and being part of community decision making or whatever's would come up, right? But is there anything else that you want to share about that opportunity?
Yeah, well, we do ask people to apply. You have to be approved to be part of our community because we want to be a drama-free zone of people committed to doing the work. I'm not that people never vent or need to talk about their frustrations or whatever, but our general values are if you've got an issue with someone, you go talk to them about it. If you need coaching, fine, but don't, we want to be a gossip-free zone and a zone that's very committed to supporting each other and working together. So, but we do have lots. People can buy. Our lots start at only 87,000 US. So beautiful lots. Almost every lot in the place has a view of the ocean and the Guanacaste Peninsula, just spectacular views. Our name, Vista Mundo, is actually a play on words because we're not only a community with a worldview, but we literally have one of the nicest views in the country from most of the lots, which are just stunning. And there's also, if somebody's really inspired and they want to take over the running of our first retreat center here, our vision is that by the time the community's done, there'll be 2 or 3 retreat centers in the community, because I really do believe having sister retreat centers all supporting and collaborating with each other has been a model that's worked really, really well in other Costa Rican communities, and we want to replicate that here. Some of the most thriving, vibrant communities in Costa Rica have multiple retreat centers in them, so the model just is stellar. So, I mean, if people are interested in any of that, you can come look at our community website. It's vistamundo.info. And there's a contact us button right there. And if you're thinking of moving to Costa Rica, we've got a free course you can do. We just piled all our knowledge. We poured all our knowledge into a little course. You know, if you're interested finding out about schools or buying a car or the residency process or whatever, we had all the community members make a list of what are all the things you wish you knew when you were coming down here. And we made a little free course for anyone considering moving to Costa Rica. So that's our gift to you. So feel free to come to our website for any of those things.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'll put the link in the show notes below, everyone. So, I mean, this was a really beautiful conversation from my perspective. I hope you guys all enjoyed it as well and learned something about the difference in cultures and got excited. And I got to say, I love Teresa. I love you so much and so grateful for your leadership and how, you know, you've demonstrated being a person that's a stand for people to be respected, you know, and for us to respect different ways of life and different perspectives and be actual transformational artists, right? Actually transform ourselves through the process of this co-creation. That's so beautiful. Is there anything else you want to share before we head out the door?
You know, I love the recent show you did on the 5 ways we ward off wealth, because it really had me thinking about how often as North Americans, and I would have fallen into this category a couple decades ago, but we stay stuck in a living environment or a situation we don't love because we think we can't change it. You know, we don't believe in ourselves enough. And when I see how abundant and utterly wealthy my life has become from making this move to just choose paradise, choose to go where there actually is paradise on earth, not just from a physical environment standpoint, but from a, how do I unashamedly pick my neighbors, you know? So all I would say is if you're listening to this and you feel inspired and you really have been wondering, like, is there a better way out there to live? Like, take a leap, come visit us. Even if you just like buy a vacation package and come hang out for a week and see what your more better would be. Because I promise you, sticking in a situation that you don't love for fear that you can't create the more better isn't the downstream path. It isn't what you were meant to do in this lifetime. And we'd love to meet you too. So just come on down and see us.
Oh, that's awesome. I want to come. So
I
next
can't
up.
wait to see you guys. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. And I'll put the links in the show notes, you guys, so you can check it out. You can find out more about Teresa. She's a beautiful human being. And that's it for now. So thank you for listening. Share it with anybody that you know that might be interested in relocating to Costa Rica. And we're going to give you kisses now. So I always give kisses at the end of the shows. If you want to join me, you can, Teresa. But thank you so much, everyone, for listening, for staying till the end, and for just being part of our community. I'm so grateful for you and for sharing it out and commenting and all that other good stuff too. Here come your kisses. Mwah. And we love you. And we'll see you next time on Soul Nectar Show. Bye for now, everyone. If you found even one gold nugget in this episode of Soul Nectar Show, will you do us a favor? Will you subscribe, like, and share this episode? Maybe even write a comment and let us know what you thought about it. We really, really want to engage with you at a much deeper level. Let's be part of community together. Have a great week, everyone. Bye for now. To dive in deeper to nourishing conversation, visit soulnectar.show.
Soul Nectar Show. Awaken, awake, show. Take a sip from the drip of nectar, from the source of who you are.